No, hold on.
I know better. I know to wait for Jackie. Jackie is always right, which she will prove again later today. See, there you go.
Tammy?
Was that Tammy?
Is that Tammy?
Yeah, that's,
I didn't hear anything.
Small voice coming.
Just the voice in your head, Chase.
Yeah, it's, I'm like,
All right, we will get started. I'd like to welcome everybody out to our work meeting for January 13th, 2021 for the Harriman City Council. We will begin with a review of this evening's agenda. Any items that we need to make adjustments to today? No?
On tonight's agenda, no?
Okay, awesome. Future agenda items that the council members would like to see on a future agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one, if I may. Recently in our Community Development Committee, we had a report from EDC Utah in which they explained some of the value that they add, some of the things that they can do with us as a city. But through that interview, there were a number of questions that I had coming out of that that I think would be a benefit to have a report to the entire council about the answers to these specific questions. So as an agenda item regarding our economic development efforts, here's the questions I have. What is the value proposition we're making to potential businesses, both in a qualitative and quantitative way? What businesses are we a good fit for? What businesses are we trying to attract? What metrics or data are we marketing, which kind of goes back to the value proposition point. How do we get more looks in our city? What cost share funds from EDC Utah could or should we be using? What are our top 5 development sites? And what incentives have we considered or are offering or would like to offer to attract appropriate businesses? So those are the questions I would like to address.
I know that our staff has done an amazing job in the past with that, and I'm sure they have many of those questions answered. I'm
sure.
Could do it right now, so I have no problem with having that as an agenda item in the future to review in an appropriate manner.
Thank you.
I've got one, Mayor. I know there's been a little bit of discussion around, and I think that this can more just be on for a work meeting discussion, but I want to have and get some input from our city recorder and then from the rest of staff as it relates to ranked choice voting. I know that that's been a discussion that's out there. I believe that there has been an adjacent community that has passed a resolution potentially to go to that. I know that there's other communities that are talking about that opportunity or at least having that option. And I think it's something that, again, if it's going to be, we should at least know the pros, the cons, the options that come along with ranked choice voting. I think there's a lot of, I guess, myths out there of what is a pro, what is a con, and those types of things. I would just like to have a good discussion about that, and then so we can make a determination as a council whether it's something that we feel like is appropriate for us to pursue, is to have an option out here. But it's just something that I would like to see on a future agenda for discussion.
Okay, we will get that on. We'll move on to item 1.3, leadership task list review. We have that sent out to us twice a week. Are there any items that we need to discuss at this time regarding that list?
I do have something I would like to, excuse me, I'm just trying to get back to, so many emails. I was trying to get back to the last one and that, I know. I actually would just like and I know that it's on the leadership task list, and that's why I wanted to look at it to see, but I'm actually very interested to get an update on where we're at in our recruiting process with Robert Half for the city manager position. Honestly, I feel like we've had quite a length of time since we approved entering into that agreement with him, but I haven't seen a lot that we're that we've made a lot of progress, and so I really just want to know where we're at with that.
So we had a really rough first meeting with them.
Rough in how? What does that
Rough
mean?
is in preliminary or rough is in not eye to eye?
A lot of technical difficulties. The lead recruiter was driving and was in and out of service and dropping calls, and it did not reflect well on us. We were actually astonished that it went the way it did. We gave them another chance to meet with us again, and it was 100 times better. We felt a lot better about it after that meeting. So they believe that they will be able to produce some candidates by the end of this month for us to review and to look at. That's really kind of where we're at. They're going through their headhunting process. They're working on a brochure with Tammy to put out. So do you have any other update than that, Chase?
They're doing an initial kind of screening of candidates before they give us a final list to look at. And that's not a final list, right? This is a preliminary list that has been screened by them based upon the criteria that we've received from you, that we've passed on to them for candidates. So it may take a few rounds before we get a sufficient pool to move into the interview phase, but they said the earliest we might expect to be doing interviews would be middle of February, if I recall. So,
And obviously, I think we've talked all along about, wanting to take the appropriate time to find the right candidate. But I think in order to do that, there has to be substantial work being put in to that effort of finding the right candidate. And again, I just personally haven't seen anything, haven't heard anything. I guess, Wendy, you just mentioned developing a brochure. That's great. I guess I'm just I would think that would be something that they would be able to do very quickly
We thought that too.
with the experience that they said that they had, but it sounds like we're having to go through a very robust process just to get a brochure turned out. I'm just having a hard time understanding that.
Yes, and I think we talked about this as staff. I think it's just because we're not used to the way they do their recruiting. It's very different than what any of us have seen before. They don't really post things. They actually just go out and target specific people. Our request was, we want a brochure, we want a posting, here are the places we want it posted, and they're not used to working like that either. So they really focus on LinkedIn kind of to do their recruitment.
Do you know if they've actually utilized that platform thus far?
They have given us a progress report, which we could probably send on with some of the candidates they've already given outreach to, that they've talked to, and have either said they're interested or not. And then they go through another layer of discussion and interview, and then they go through another layer, and then they'll bring us those candidates that they feel are the best fit. So it's been an interesting process. It's not gone anything like I thought it was going to.
Do we feel like it is actually, or do we feel like it's met the parameters of the agreement we entered into with them?
I think it's too early to tell. The holidays really put a wrench in everything too. So I would say we'll give them another couple weeks to see what happens, and then we'll make a decision at that point.
I mean, we have some incredibly talented people on our staff here that I think
We do.
could have, some of these things you're talking about probably could have turned out a brochure and postings and some of those things in very short order and been incredibly well done.
Sounds like our staff is doing that, and that gives me the same pause.
Helping them, we're hand-holding people. So we're getting there. Like I said, the last meeting went a lot better than the first, and so we're making progress. We'll see what we get tomorrow. It's actually
If I
tomorrow.
might just say, though, their reputation should give them a certain benefit of the doubt about their process. It may not be what we were expecting, or it may be different than how we would approach it. However, they've earned the right to be able to say, this is how we do it. Our results kind of speak for themselves.
Right, and I think that's why we're giving them
Some extra time.
some extra
Yeah.
time
Got it.
and working with them a little bit, because I agree with you on that.
I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I think as the client, we have the right to say, this is what our expectations are. Okay, if we can get frequent updates on that, I think it'd be helpful for all of us.
We can add it to the update that Jackie sends out on Tuesdays. Does
Thank you.
that work?
Sorry, I'm joining the conversation pretty late, but I definitely wanted to talk about that, and so I apologize if I say something that's repetitive, but I agree with the comments that have just been made, but is there anybody, I too would like more frequent updates on that. Would it be appropriate or helpful if a couple of us participated in those conversations and engage with them more? Because what are we, 90 days out? I mean, I just want to see this thing get moving.
Me too. When we initially put that out, the only response that I believe I received was from Councilman Smith, who was interested. If you all are interested in participating, you're more than welcome to join us in those progress meetings.
Do you think it would help
They're
move
all
things along?
virtual.
We have one scheduled every Thursday morning with Robert Half.
With
And then
Robert
they
Half.
provide a written update as well.
I apologize, Wendy, you seemed,
Yeah.
you seemed very
I saw that.
enthusiastic with your Me Too about wanting to get this process going.
I'm still interested in participating in that process, and especially to Sherry's point, if you think that there is a benefit maybe of having some elected officials on there as part of that conversation with them to
Yeah.
help push that process along.
Yeah, we got pretty stern with them the last week, but certainly, whoever would like to join, you're more than welcome. We can send you that meeting link.
Yeah, it's not to try and suggest that you're not stern enough with them. It's
Right.
just that if you think that would be of any benefit to have us join, I think that would be.
Great.
And to your point, this is your hiring, right? We're kind of facilitating it, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the decision is the council's. So I think that would be an added benefit.
Okay, I do too. I just think that we need to take a more active engagement in it, so. If you could send us out the information for the meetings or something, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to item 2.1, discussion of the stormwater impact fee analysis and impact fee facility plan. Jonathan, it's your time to shine.
You shine all the time, Jenna.
Shining on. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to be brief here. I'm actually going to turn some time over here to our consultant, Bowen and Collins, specifically Cameron Ballantyne. What I thought I'd do is just kind of explain briefly our approach. As you know, we adopted the storm drain master plan late last year. Now we're moving on to the next step, which is looking at, reviewing, discussing, doing public hearing, and then hopefully adopting a new impact fee. So this next step, we're just here in open session, or excuse me, in the work session to show and apprise the council of the information. And then we're going to open up a public hearing January 27th at our next meeting. And then depending on how that goes, we will look forward to and recommend for adopting on February 10th. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Cameron.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. As you said, I'm Cameron Ballantyne. I'm with Bowen, Collins & Associates, and so I want to talk a little bit about the storm drain impact fees. Let's see. There you go. So just a little bit of information on impact fees. What we did for this analysis was, as Jonathan stated, we have completed a master plan, and as part of that master plan, a capital facilities plan was completed that documents what projects are needed in the storm drain system to serve development in Harriman as it continues to grow. And so that was all outlined in a master plan document that's been adopted. As part of that, to do the impact fee analysis, we have to allocate the cost for those projects and split them between what are going to serve existing users and what is going to serve future development. And so that was part of our impact fee analysis, was to figure out the cost split between those two different groups. Also, as part of that, the value of the available capacity in the existing storm drain system was also estimated. So there are several storm drain facilities already constructed. Those storm drain facilities have value, and so as part of this analysis, we looked at that value to figure out what will be used by existing users and what will be used by future development, and figuring out the cost split on those as well. The service area was also defined, and then we also provided a professional certification as required by impact fee law. So this is a map of Harriman City. There are 2 service areas. Used to be 3, but 2 of those service areas have been combined into a single service area. So now you have the main service area for Harriman, and then also the smaller service area specifically for the town center. So that is now the current boundaries of the service areas. The reason the 2 areas were combined is because in the past they've had different storm drain requirements, but with some of the recent changes, those storm drain requirements are now consistent across the city in that main service area, and so those 2 service areas were combined together to a single service area. So this is the impact fee analysis. So you can see it. I won't go through this all in great detail, but just a brief summary. The total cost for the components, and so that's the value. There's the value of the existing system, what is going to be constructed in the next 10-year window. We only look at what's going to be constructed in the next 10 years as required by impact fee law. And then the cost that's going to serve future development and the cost that's going to serve existing users, and then what we estimate that will be developed over the next 10 years in acres. And that's how you come up with your impact fee. It is $2,610 per acre in the main Harriman area, and it's $4,088 for the town center. So that is the breakdown of the costs of the impact fees and how we estimated those based on what's allowed in the Utah state law. This is my final slide, so just to show you what the impact fees are. As I stated in the previous slide, the main service area impact fee will be $2,600. In the past, it's been up to $3,400. And in the south area, it was $1,300, and we're proposing to go to the $2,600. And so on part of Harriman, the impact fee is coming up a little bit, and part of Harriman, it's coming down a little bit. But between those 2, we're about average between the 2 of them. And then obviously there is a change in the impact fee for the town center as well. That's my last slide. That's what we're proposing is the $2,600 impact fee for the main service area and the $4,088 for the town center. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Jonathan, do you have anything else to add? No, that's it. Okay. Did council members have any questions? Okay, if we have no further questions, thank you for the report. We appreciate it. We know that these are important parts of helping our city grow and develop, and we're grateful for the work that the UTA team put in for us. Thank you. We will move on to 2.2, discussion of water impact fee analysis and impact fee facility plan. Justin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Obviously, some of this information will be a little redundant because they're both impact fees for Harriman City. But one more thing, essentially, as far as the timeline goes, it's going to follow the storm drain as far as our adoption process and public hearings. So the one thing I did want to mention is, I want to say a week or so before Christmas, Chase did send this information for both of these impact fees to the Home Builders Association for their review. And to my knowledge, we haven't received any information back. So we like to do that ahead of time so that we can, if they have any concerns or issues, we can work through those before we have an adopted plan. So I just wanted to make that.
That's a question. Is it against the rules for you to take your mask down while you're up there? Because I can't hear you. That's good. Thank you. That helps me
There.
a bunch.
Carrie, I was actually going to wait till he was done. That's the same thing. Is the council comfortable with whoever presents taking their mask off? I am. Thanks.
Well, good. So similar to Jonathan, I'll pass this time along on to Bowen Collins. We have Andrew McKinnon here. Like John said, we adopted the master plan. I will make one caveat. As we went through the process of this impact fee analysis, we realized that we need to go back to the master plan and make some adjustments. So we had to take that, we had to modify just a few minor text changes in regards to water rights. So we had to take that back through the process. So that will go back to Planning Commission, go through a public hearing process. But what I'm trying to do is get so we can adopt all of them on the same night. So that's what we're doing. So you will see the master plan again, but it was just because we had to make the 2 documents match with some minor changes.
So they're minor changes.
Oh yeah, just minor changes to some language, that's it. So At any rate, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks, Justin.
Well, this works out pretty good because I brought my tie, but I didn't bring my dress mask. So. I'm Andrew McKinnon with Bowen Collins and Associates. I'm good. I go this way or which way? Forward. Am I just waiting? Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so just to summarize some of the major changes from the last water master plan and how it impacts impact fees. Since the last master plan, the growth projections for the city have changed somewhat significantly. The city has purchased a bunch of land and in conjunction with the Utah National Guard on sort of the hillside in association with the hillside protection zone. So that made some changes to the water infrastructure plans for the city. You had 13 water pressure zones previously, you're kind of come down to 8, so you don't have to go up quite as high. The secondary water system planning, the approach for providing secondary water has changed somewhat to try to optimize use of the sources along with capital costs. So the secondary water system is a benefit to the city by reducing your Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District purchases, but you still have to put the infrastructure in for that, so we're trying to balance that. The water right fee and the impact fee, facility fee were previously separate. So there was a sort of a capital cost fee, and then there was a water right fee. And as part of this impact fee, it made sense just to combine them because you're buying a lot of water from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. The way that capital infrastructure cost is paid for is a little bit different, so it made sense to combine the fees. In addition to all those changes, conservation has been a significant factor in this water master plan. The state's adopted its new conservation goals, and the city's basically adopted those goals, and it will be trying to achieve those as moving forward. And then another reason is just the construction costs have been inflating relatively quickly, and so we're trying to keep up with those construction costs as they inflate. Just to talk about 10-year growth, we have projections of 10-year growth that were based on input from the city planning. So these are just kind of the summaries of growth in the population along with culinary demand and secondary demand. And we focus mostly on a peak day demand. So this is kind of the expectation you'd have for summer days when everybody's irrigating what your demand's. In 2010, you had 0 secondary demand because your secondary system had not come online yet, and so you've seen that's kind of jumped up quickly, and it'll continue to grow as the city grows. So this is a map of the culinary water system, and we've got a legend that kind of shows where your existing facilities are. You have existing pump stations, and then we've identified pump stations that need to be constructed in the next 10 years in the blue, with the little P, and then pump stations that will need to be constructed in the year time frame beyond 10 years. Similar coloring for the tanks that need to be constructed in the next 10 years, and then we've got future pipes that are called out and labeled in the 10-year window. And so we've also identified the 10-year growth areas in this legend to kind of identify what the city planning department's identified. This is where we think growth will occur. It's okay if growth is outside of those areas as long as the overall growth numbers are close to the same. So that's our 10-year growth and the facilities we need for the culinary system. Same figure, similar colors for the secondary water system. So you can see where we're planning on new pipelines, new storage reservoirs to meet 10-year requirements for growth. Any questions just on the facilities so far?
Yeah, so the future annexation area, it doesn't compute into this plan, it's just listed, correct?
Correct. So there are facilities that go through the future annexation area, but in terms of the growth for that area, that is not included in this plan.
Thank you.
In terms of the costs, I won't spend too much time on this figure. The idea is that we want to break up costs between existing users, 10-year growth, and then growth beyond 10 years. And we've broken the costs up sort of by category. So you have wells and springs and water rights that represent one category, and then you have your secondary shares. Production costs include like in drilling a new well. You don't have any plans to drill new wells in the next 10 years, so those costs are zero. Then you have pumping costs, storage costs, transmission costs, and that's kind of the breakdown of just the overall cost. And you can see that you got the facilities that are dedicated to existing. There's quite a few facilities that are just serving existing users, and then there's still quite a few costs that go to 10-year users. Just go. So this is the overall calculation of the impact fee, and I don't want to go through all the details, but the bottom line is you want to break up the cost between the costs that are serving existing users and the costs that are going to serve the 10-year growth, so that you can calculate that impact fee by demand. And what I will note that we actually calculated the impact fee on a gallon per minute basis as part of this calculation. And then we eventually convert that to an ERU later on. But because you have secondary and culinary water that's used kind of in different proportions, it made sense to, rather than try to have a secondary ERU and a culinary ERU, we just calculated a gallon per minute demand, and then we convert that to an ERU depending on where you're at in the system later on.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Where does that actual, I guess, value that you plug in at the GPM, then where does that come from?
The gallons per minute?
Uh-huh.
So that the gallon per minute is a projection based on measurements of the city's water use during peak day demand.
Okay.
So for
based on
existing
our history of use.
Historic use,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
This is a summary of the results by lot size. And you can see that the impact fee that is proposed is higher than the impact fee that currently exists for smaller lots. And then as you get to larger lots, the price actually goes down. And the reason that occurs is because of our assumptions on how much irrigated area is there per lot. We would expect that the smaller lots, the ratio of irrigated area is a little higher for the smaller lots compared to the larger lots. So you would expect for a large 1 acre lot to be, you're not going to have the whole thing as bluegrass, for the whole thing. So we would expect that to not be that high. When you go to implement the impact fee, you may want to take a look if there's a lot that is planning on having, an acre of grass, that may need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. But in general, this is what we would expect for the lot sizes. And then we have a similar summary by meter size. Most impact fees will be in the 3/4 inch and smaller range, but you will, as meter sizes get bigger, you can get a lot more service, provide a lot more service through larger meters. And so these are kind of the factors that go into that. And that's my last line. So do you guys have any questions? Okay, great.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Is Justin still back there?
Yeah, I was going to ask Justin, do you have anything else?
You were hiding. I actually have a question, Justin, that maybe you can answer based on just a comment that was made there near the end of the presentation, and that was that obviously if we know of a larger lot, an acre, that is going to put it all in, in grass and irrigate it, that we, may want to review that on a case-by-case basis. I know where we have done that in the opposite, someone saying that, because of how they have it planned out, we've chosen to reduce a fee a little bit because they, the plan they have in place. I guess, do we have the ability, if we know that someone is truly going to do that, on a case-by-case, to charge more than what we have set as the fee?
So I think what we'd have to do is look at what their plan is and look at how much that might compare to what we've assumed, right? And then say that we're assuming that they have 50% grass, and then for the assumption in the impact fee, but they bring it in and say they have 75%. We may have to look at that to see what that difference is and to see if it justifies a larger cost.
Do we have the authority to do that on a case-by-case basis?
I think we probably have some flexibility there to do that because of the impact we have.
It really depends on what's finally approved in the enactment. You can't ever collect fees greater than what's approved in the enactment. But if you specify these different parameters, there's some flexibility, usually only going down, right, to adjust that. But again, it really comes down to what we what we finalize in the enactment.
So we'll need to put in some language around the ability to.
So
do something
generally,
like this.
what my practice has been is, and my recommendation is almost always to adopt the highest impact fee that comes back from the IFFP and IFA.
Got it.
And then the city can then go in based upon a developer's recommendation or application, reduce that based upon some of these conditions that Justin's mentioned.
Yeah,
That's
and,
what we've done in the past.
and I think the frequency of that happening would be very small, right? And so I don't know that we would be able to see that, because a lot of times when the home is built, we only see the plan for the front and side yards. We don't have the plan for the back, so it's hard to know what they're gonna do on the full lot.
Yeah, very rarely do we have someone say, oh, by the way,
Yeah, I wanna pay more.
yeah, you've calculated it wrong. I'm actually gonna have more grass than you think I am.
Yeah.
That's right,
I don't know who can afford to irrigate an acre of water
Yep.
cultivary.
that's right.
Can you come up to the mic so that those that are not physically here can hear?
In the impact fee analysis, there is actually a calculation for irrigated area. So what is the fee per irrigated acre? So that could be like easily calculated, and it's in the impact fee analysis, so that wouldn't be anything
Awesome.
added on there, so.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the council? Okay, if there's no further questions, I will accept a motion to adjourn the work meeting.
It's way too early.
We have a special Community Development and Renewal Agency of Harriman City agenda that we are noticed for 6, so we can start that immediately.
Nice.
Okay, I move that we adjourn city council meeting, work meeting.
Nope, you said it.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
A motion from Steve, a second from Sherry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have adjourned the work meeting. We will move into our Special Community Development and Renewal Agency of Harriman City agenda, our Harriman City meeting for Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. We will begin with item 1.1, motion for review and outline of the finalization process to approve the minutes for January 13th, 2021.
I'd like to make a motion to have the minutes of January 13th, 2021 be prepared and distributed to each member of the redevelopment agency board. The board will have 10 days to review the minutes and submit any changes to the secretary. If, after 10 days, there are no changes, the minutes will stand approved. If there are changes, the process will be followed until all changes are made and the board is in agreement.
Second.
I have a motion from Steve and a second from Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Item 2.1, discussion pertaining to participation agreement with Harriman 73 Partners LLC for the designation of an auto mall as a project area and the sales tax incentive for the project. Chase.
Thank you. So this is the only discussion item on your agenda tonight. It has come before you a few times before, but there's been some intermittent history. So I, for my own purposes, went back and looked at that because some of it predates my time, so I wanted to get a full picture of where we started and the direction I've received and previous council received going forward. So this participation agreement between, or proposed participation agreement between Harriman 73 Partners and the CDRA first came before the board in December of 2019. At that time, the interlocal agreement between the agency and the city was executed. So there was an interlocal that anticipated that 70% of the point of sales tax from the auto mall would be contributed or designated to the agency for purposes of developing that area. Shortly after that, at the same meeting, in fact, the draft participation agreement was presented. I went back and watched the video just to make sure I knew what was discussed, and it seemed like there were some concerns from Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Orrin, and Councilmember Smith about the oversight of the funds, the control of that potential TIF that was being contributed from the city to the agency, and then from the agency to the participant. There was also a question from Councilmember Smith about the cap of the incentive underneath the participation agreement. And the interlocal agreement's important here because that is for a period of 15 years, but it does not provide a cap that the city needs to provide of that sales tax generated from that area. So in other words, unless we designate a cap in the participation agreement, the city would just contribute 70% of the sales tax for the duration of the interlocal agreement. But if we go in, and this is actually anticipated in the interlocal agreement, and set a cap in the participation agreement, we still contribute 70% of those funds annually until the maximum is reached. So if the maximum is reached after 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, then it terminates even though the 15-year period hasn't expired.
Great for everybody.
Yeah, which is great for everyone. That's exactly right. And that's what we hope. And that's actually the pattern that we've seen in other similar projects throughout the state. So that was the December 11th meeting. It really didn't come back until September 9th, after I had started. I don't know what changes the previous city attorney had made, if any, to that agreement. So I brought it back on September 9th to the CDRA board just to kind of get a feel of where we were at. Some of those same concerns about control and oversight were brought up by both Councilmember Henderson and Councilmember Orn, and there was a discussion of why do we not just give it directly to the dealers? That discussion didn't really lead to any direction, so that's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight. I've proposed some language and maybe some ideas that the board can consider as we finalize that language and implement some additional controls to get this executed.
A cap, would you recommend a dollar cap or a percentage cap, or how does that work?
You know, it's a great question. I think looking at historical agreements, participation agreements of this type, not only in our city, but in other redevelopment agencies, it's more common to see a dollar cap. But the annual amount paid is usually a percentage. It could also be a dollar cap. For example, the Anthem TIF is a dollar cap. We pay $200,000, I believe, to Winco annually for a total of $400,000. We pay $400,000, and I'm spitballing some numbers here, so Alan might snap at me. $400,000. I hope I'm not committing more money to one of these developers than $400,000 annually, a maximum of $400,000, even if we generate more, right? We don't give them a percentage, we just give them up to a certain dollar amount. If they don't generate that, they only get what they generate. So it can go both ways. Really just determined upon the project, what you're trying to accomplish there. It's very kind of on a case-by-case basis. But I would say that generally it's usually a dollar amount that you would see.
Like an annual cap and a lifetime cap, yeah?
You do have to consider that this interlocal designates 70% annually, so that annual cap would be hard to calculate, if that makes sense. So 100% of, and I'll just use some numbers for the purpose of this example, if we generate $1 million annually from this area, 700,000 of that would go to the CDRA. We have some obligations that would whittle that down and make it about $620,000, and that would be the amount that could potentially go to the development. So, but this is part of the discussion, so I'll just get into it now. You can put limits on certain types of uses. So you could say, if we're going to go in and designate $4 million for infrastructure, and we are going, so whether that's $1 million a year for 4 years or $500,000 for 8 years, those are the types of controls that I'm suggesting we can put in to have a little more oversight on those funds. And that would require the developer to submit invoices for those developments as they're, or infrastructure improvements as they're installed, related to the development that, again, would give some additional oversight and control.
Can we put in like controls, like per se, if they do turn in receipts, do they have to be within industry standard kind of, can we put those types of language
Absolutely,
things into?
yeah.
Can we make sure that we're?
And I believe that's our practice with Anthem and others, is that they submit us the construction invoices, essentially, so we know what that money's going for. That's a good look as well from a transparency perspective for the public to say, this is what we're purchasing with these sales tax rebates.
I am not necessarily, I don't necessarily see the need to put in annual limits. I mean, for me, the reason to put in an annual limit is to space out how long it takes for them to get paid, or for that money to go out, and so that we're getting a certain percentage, or we're getting the extra every year. So it's whether, do we want the tax benefit now, or do we want the tax benefit later?
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, I would rather us get that tax liability off to who it's been promised to, and then take the full dollars in later when, once that tax liability has been met. That's my personal opinion, but there is also value in saying, well, we want some of that tax value now, as opposed to waiting, 5 years and getting, so that's just my thoughts on that.
So
One of the, oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, just to make sure, I think I understand, Mayor, you would be more in favor of a total cap,
Total cap, yeah.
but not a per year cap, and
Yes.
just allow it to perform how it's going to perform.
How it performed, and if they don't manage to hit in 15 years, they don't manage to hit in 15 years. But, if it's still 70%, because there's usually a percentage per year, that they're gonna get. So if they're only gonna get 70% of the taxes, city's still looking at 30%, so we're still gonna benefit in the event that they perform. And if they perform faster than expected, they get their benefit, which incentivizes them to perform sooner, and it helps us, because we're still benefiting. So I don't have any
Yeah.
problem with.
I understand.
And to your point, Mayor and Councilmember Smith, that is, I think, recommended in my perspective, because sales generally grow, right? You'll have the first commercial business come in, and then the second and the third, and then that tax base gets larger and larger. And the term is then shortened because you have a total cap that's unrestricted by the annual amount. And it shortens the time that the city has to defer the 100% benefit, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So,
What do you think, Alan?
I got a couple of questions,
Sorry.
actually. No, Chase and I have talked about it, but is the 15-year length per dealership or for the whole project?
it is for the whole project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was one of the requests from the developer, and I've put that on hold for a minute, that they trigger that at different periods. I think for the agency's purpose, it would just be simplest if it was triggered at one period and had a longer length. I've seen other agreements that are only 5 years in length or 7 years in length. So this would be a little bit longer term, but it would still provide the developer and other dealerships an opportunity to come in at periods.
In the idea with the dollar cap or the higher dollar cap would allow that to resolve itself much sooner. If it's successful, there's a lot more dealerships come in faster. That's done in
It's
5
done.
years instead of 20 years. I got it, okay.
Yeah. The only other question I have, concern I have, and maybe this is not valid and I'm thinking not clearly here, but it seems like every time somebody wants to come to Harriman, they come and ask us for brakes, right? And so are we gonna hit the cap and then the next dealership is gonna come in and say, give us the brakes you gave everyone else?
So that's one of the things I'd like to talk about. I have a few discussion points on that. I'll let Alan finish his questions, and then I'll come back to that, because I think that's an important piece.
The other is just a comment. The only one we've ever done a cap on, or a cap per year, was Winco. And you might remember when we were getting Winco, there was another city down the road that actually had them ready to go. We matched the agreement that the other city was offering to get them to come here. So we structured it that way. You ask me how I feel about it, I hate giving money away. But I also know the climate that we're in, that's really what you got to do, Our legislature has structured things so that cities fight with each other and give things away so that everyone loses. But, that's what we live in right now.
We do hate giving money away, right? I will point out that, not to play devil's advocate to Alan, but this is also a redevelopment agency, right? So under the statute, the city has determined previously that giving away money is good for this area, at least, right? And so the discussion that we're having now with this participation agreement is, one, how much of it are we going to give away, and for what purpose, and under what conditions? So, not to push back on Alan, because I agree with him wholeheartedly, so.
I agree with you.
Yeah, we like having money in the city's coffers, but.
And I mean, the whole point of this, so that somebody who may be hearing this for the first time as we talk about this, the whole point is we're not getting the tax revenue right now as it is. So the benefit that's coming out of this is, yes, we're giving away some of the sales tax, but if nothing ever comes, we won't get any sales tax anyways.
Right.
And so we are giving up the option to take some future benefit, less of a future benefit, still get a future benefit, but less of a future benefit to stimulate that growth so that that happens as opposed to doing nothing and receiving no future benefit.
It's a delayed benefit.
Now, is it guaranteed that that's going to happen? Is there, there's arguments back and forth on should or shouldn't we? But I think that's the general idea of this type of process.
Do you think it's better for us to put an annual cap or just a lifetime cap?
Not sure how you really put an annual cap on it.
It might be tough given the interlocal agreement that we've drafted, like I said, because 70% of that goes to the 70% of what the city collects from that area goes to the CDRA regardless, right? So the CDRA then would just be holding on to money potentially if they had an excess of what they were obligated to pay annually. So.
What were your recommendations about adding to set some of those criteria?
Yeah, so let me dive into that, Mayor, and this will also answer Councilmember Orn's question. One of the recommendations I have to kind of implement some of those additional controls is to include some language in the participation agreement that designates a portion of that cap directly to the developer. This isn't too atypical. Like I said, this is something we've done in Anthem. This allows them to use some of those funds to install improvements, roads, pay down land in order to entice dealerships to come in, things that we've talked about before in some of the other meetings and that are pretty common in other redevelopment agencies in our city as well as throughout the state. The remaining portion of that, and this is where I think we're getting a little creative, in order to allow some flexibility still with that additional money, but also have those additional controls and oversight, is to allow the developer to commit those funds to dealers. So rather than us paying the developer the dealer's incentives, we allow the developer to go out, contact these dealers, and say, hey, the city has contributed, or the CDRA rather, has contributed $15 million over 15 years, and I can give you $1.5 million to come in, right? I'm just giving some numbers here.
Right.
But then what would happen is we would execute a participation agreement with that end user. This is similar to what we've done in Anthem as well. We had the Anthem developers go out and contact Winco. They found the terms that it would take to get Winco in here, and then we executed a participation agreement with Winco after those terms had already been negotiated. But it takes the city out of that negotiation phase, right? We're not in the business of bringing businesses into the city, right? That we leave that up to the developer, but we still have some control over
Yes or no?
who receives those funds.
And the language of that.
Yes.
Because that concerns me too, is some people negotiate good contracts and some people don't. And so I would like to have some oversight over that language.
And for what it's worth, I'm supportive of that approach.
I agree with that as well. I think that having someone whose job it is to do the negotiation and work with that is good, but then having us have some final say, but also executing directly with the end user, showing that there's that goodwill between us and the end user is a positive as well for us working with them as a potential member of our community. So I'm good with that.
And I think an additional benefit to this method is that we are then dealing with the end user who is going to be there, in perpetuity, where the developer may come in, get everything set up, and then remove themselves from this development. We are now working directly with the end user.
Yeah.
So.
I like that.
No, and I absolutely support that as well, and I voiced that via email the other night too, as you put these options out to us. But just really quick, one thing too is, is we talked a little bit ago before we got up, in this meeting just about, EDC Utah that was brought up, and I think that EDC Utah is even one, and it might have been mentioned there, that definitely says, as a city, you need to be prepared of what these incentive packages are going to be in order to try and entice those people to get here. And I think by setting these parameters, this is exactly what we're trying to do.
And that's also in line with the act right, is
Yeah.
that the redevelopment agencies, I'm sorry, I call them that, they're not called that anymore, I don't know what this legislature is. the
Right,
term.
they change it every year.
Yeah, they change it every year, so I call it a redevelopment agency. They're empowered to give away that money, like Alan said, right? And have some broad parameters for which they can do that. That doesn't mean we can't implement controls, and that's what we're doing here. But you're right, the Act as well as EDC Utah, they both anticipate that there will be some incentive packages that will be provided in order to get certain businesses to come in.
Well,
So-
and I definitely agree with Alan. I'm the very same way personally. I hate giving away my money, but, you know, a smart person once said to me, you know, it's better to get a percentage of something than all of nothing. And I think that's definitely what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find that balance of what that incentive is and how we structure that to give us the controls to put us in that position to benefit the city long-term.
So I'd like to talk as well about a potential cap. But before I do that, I'd like to just maybe consolidate some of the feedback I've gotten from the board so far. It sounds like you're in agreement that there be a certain percentage that's given directly to the developer to use for development-related purposes, infrastructure, roads, whatever else they may need. And then,
Let me clarify that.
yeah,
That we're allowing the developer to have direct negotiation input over, but those funds would never go directly to them to be given to somebody else, right?
well, my recommendation would be that we allow them to use those funds with the requirement that they still submit invoices for those reimbursed, because they're gonna have to come in and put some base infrastructure in.
Sure.
Right? And it's anticipated, at least under the act, that some of these sales tax rebates be used for that purpose.
Completely understand, but as you were talking about money that would go to third parties per se, right? Or funds that might be used to induce a dealership to come, though we wouldn't have them serve as the distributor of those tax funds to the dealership, right? We're just talking, we would reimburse them directly for the costs of development that they are putting into.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I understand.
And
Yeah.
you also made another comment earlier about taking down land. I'm not comfortable with giving them money to take down land. Is that something that we are comfortable with? I would think that I'm comfortable with them using it to improve the land that's
It
part
is,
of it.
I mean, it is something that's anticipated within the act, right? I mean, you look at this area in particular, there were a lot of different parcels that needed to be purchased to combine the one whole. There were some that were purchased at very reasonable prices and others that needed to be taken down at a much higher price to complete that whole, right? And again, that's all part of the redevelopment project area. And it's anticipated, at least in the act, that some of that money may go to drop that price such that it entices a business to come in at a certain square footage value.
I guess.
So it's not used to purchase land directly.
That's what I'm.
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
the,
I'm saying. I'm
that's
like,
the distinction. Land has been purchased, right? It's to reduce the price of that land. I mean, a great example is we go in and we pay $10 a square foot for the land, but we've got a business that says, I can't come in, I can't make it pencil unless it's $7 a square foot. We
Right.
could take that land that's already been purchased and say, all right, I can give it to you for this because I can take some off the top
No,
here.
and that I'm good with. It was just the thinking about them taking down pieces of land. It's like, that is, to me, it's like, oh, that's a great deal for a developer. Just go in, you don't have to build any roads, you don't have to do any infrastructure, and you don't even have to pay for the land. The city's gonna do it all.
Yeah, so I apologize if I misspoke. It would be to buy down the price of land that's already been purchased.
No, that
so-
makes sense.
Okay. So
Go ahead, please.
a portion would go to the developer directly for those infrastructure improvements. Again, that would require invoicing in order to account for those funds being distributed directly to the developer. And then the remaining portion, which we haven't determined yet what that is, we will allow the developer to commit directly to dealers that the city would then pay to dealers, not through the developer, but directly with the end.
The only caveat I would want to add to that is that it'd be multiple dealers. I would not be comfortable with them using the entire, and I don't think that they would, but I'd like to have language in there of saying that they couldn't commit that entire portion to a single dealer. You know, I'd want to know kind of what staff's recommendation would be for how many, you know, is it, no, you know, a minimum of at least 3 dealers or whatever, because obviously the point is not to incentivize one above all else. It's to incentivize all dealerships to come because we want this to be a robust area with multiple dealers. And so I don't want to see all of that benefit go to one dealer and then taking over.
To just add on to that thought, there's also an incentive to be the first, right?
Sure, and
They should be able to get the lion's share of whatever
And,
incentives there.
I'm totally okay with that. I just don't want it to be, it doesn't have to be 30, 30, 30. It just, I don't want to see 100% or 90% in 10, you know? Like,
And I understand that. I think I'm just suggesting, I'd be eager to hear some feedback from 73 partners about some of the ideas they've had, maybe some of the discussions they've had, and what that percentage might need to look like.
or what they would be comfortable setting that limit.
Yeah, where we would want to be. I mean, if they need to give the first dealership $8 million to get them in the door,
it's quite
that
a bit.
stinks, but okay, let's get one in, you know?
And to your point, that's in practice how it works, right? There's some incentive to coming first, and again, in practice, the last business is incentivized because there's already all of this other commercial development there, right? So that changes, and again, we give the developer that flexibility to negotiate that. But to Mayor's point, we still have the final say on that participation agreement between the board and the end user.
And that might solve that. I mean,
So-
I don't, the intent is not here to put handcuffs on 73 partners. The intent is to say, we want to make it very clear the intent is multiple dealerships.
But what if you got a really big dealership that offers several different lines of cars and they could fill up the whole thing?
If they could manage to, I would be happy to consider that.
So my caution is just simply let's not put anything that prohibits that. But,
Yeah,
but just-
and
That way we ultimately have the control over it.
Yeah.
And so maybe my point is, maybe it is addressed by the other controls. I just want to be careful that we don't
No,
overextend
Yeah, I
on one,
understand.
and one, put all our eggs in one basket.
So I think I have my direction on that, unless anyone else has anything else to add. So my goal then is to add that additional language for that, bring this back for additional discussion and potential approval.
Alan, do you have any thoughts on that?
The one thing I wanted to ask was, or get your intake, a lot of these agreements limit what we give to the developer for public infrastructure, not for just their improvements. So I'm wondering if that's something we want to include in the agreement.
Specifically that it's public infrastructure or public improvement?
Yeah, I can talk to Harriman 73 Partners. Like I said, I don't know what those numbers look like to see what it is that they might need for those public improvements and others. There's some unique things about the auto mall, right, with storm drain and things like that we're dealing with. So I think it'd be good to get that feedback from them, what those numbers look like, and we can
Yeah,
can
I
build-
do like that.
we can
idea of
craft
public
that, right?
infrastructure.
I think for the purpose of this conversation, knowing how we're going to break it out is, at least the foundation of it is the most critical at this point, and then we can work on those numbers.
If I might make one comment here at the end here. I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I think I can in this case say that we're all very eager to see an auto mall come to fruition. And there have been some reluctance on some of the funding mechanisms, i.e., PID, that has created some, I would guess, some vexation on the part of 73 partners. I just want to make sure we go on record saying, I really like the CDRA TIF format of generating funds for them. It is betting on the come, right? That if nothing gets produced, there is no tax liability.
It's a great situation.
We only have to pay for it if we're getting growth in businesses coming into our city. The difference between this type of a model as the PID model is that we have to put all the tax mill rate on and do everything up front and then hope it comes down the road. That's where the reluctance from, at least, has been articulated by this body as a reason why there's some hesitation on that, but much more enthusiastic adoption of this format. And And I just, again, I want to say, we want to help 73 Partners. We want to do what we can to support them to be successful here. We are very interested in seeing this succeed. So take this money and go get one.
I'm sure they'd be happy to hear that. So I do want to just move on quickly to the cap. Again, we don't have to put a cap in place. You can just say 70% for 15 years, right? It may take them some time to get off the ground, so they may not even get close to a cap that we might put out in the first place. The alternative is that they generate crazy amounts of sales tax, right, over the next 15 years, and we lose out on potentially capturing some of that back into the city after the initial benefit has been
Well, and to me,
received.
I think there's a second conversation that goes into that because I think they're attached. And that to me is when does I can't remember the term, when does it effectively start? When does the 15?
When's the trigger date?
Well, yeah, the trigger date, that's what I'm looking
So,
for.
good question, Mayor. So the trigger date, I'll go back to the interlocal. The trigger date for the interlocal, which is again a 15-year term, starts whenever the agency decides that it starts.
So we control when that
We
starts.
we would, and the same would be true for the participation agreement. They would trigger at the same time and expire at the same time, unless, of course, they generate the cap within a shorter amount of time.
So to me, it's one or the other. Either one, we don't set a cap, but we trigger immediately, or two, we give them some time to trigger, but we set a cap.
So,
And that's my opinion.
if I could maybe speak to that, what I've seen in practice in other areas is that you say, all right, we won't trigger it until you're ready, but you have to start construction by this date and have something in place by this date.
And that I can work with. But I believe one of the reasons we ended up where we did with Winco was because that was part of our, we'll do this, but you have to start by this date and you have to be out of the ground and open by at least this date, which they far exceeded. But what we don't want is what the company that was there before Winco that didn't end up coming, that basically just had
Free reign.
Free reign, and no, I don't want that. So if we have something very specifically in place, we'll wait, but we're going to trigger on this date, but you have to have this, this, and this, or, I'm fine with working with that, but what I would not be fine with is not triggering immediately and not having a cap.
I'll say this too, to the counterpoint is, if we don't trigger it and they do bring something in, the city just maintains all of the sales tax, right? So there's a bigger benefit for us not to trigger it than there is for the developer to keep from triggering it. So, but yeah, I'll put some language into that end as well, Mayor. So going back to the cap, it's hard to really know, right, how much money is the right amount, because again, our goal here is to say we need to invest some money in this area in order to bring development. Obviously, the city's numbers would likely be different than the developer's numbers, but that doesn't mean we can't figure out what the right amount is. So what I did in kind of priming this discussion was go back and look at some of the studies that the city had done. GSBS did a study in 2017 for the city that I believe the CDRA board received, but they really looked at what the potential car buying power would be within kind of the region, and how they calculated that was they looked at the total value of new car sales within the state and divided that by the number of households, and they got a car buying power of about $4,000 per household. So then they look at how many households are in our area and how many households will be in our area over the future, and some of the numbers that they came up with based upon that calculation was that there's about $413 million in future new car buying power within a 5-mile radius of the Automall area. So there's potential, right? There's a lot of potential to generate that sales tax over the next 20 years.
Is that per annum?
What's that?
Is that per annum, or is that like lifetime?
That would be in 2014 per year. Yep.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So here's your crazier number. In Salt Lake County, Saratoga Springs, and Bluffdale and Lehigh, so kind of the surrounding areas, it's $2.6 billion in future car buying power just within that area. So that's not saying we are going to get $2.6 billion of
But
cars
it's there.
purchased, but it's the potential for the households within those regions to spend on
Knew I
on
went
new
into
cars.
the wrong business.
Right. So that number doesn't really hone us in much, but it kind of paints the picture of what we're looking at. So the next study I went to was, it's not really a study, it's the CDRA's budget for this project area. So Zion's Public Finance did that for us, and that was approved by this board, I believe, back in 2019. They project, and this is a low projection, 24.5 million of sales tax actually coming to the city over the 15-year period, starting from when the auto mall is completed to when that term would expire.
At a 70-30 or at?
That would be the city's portion.
That'd be the city's 30%.
That would be the city's 100%.
That's a
100%. Okay, that's
24.5 million over 15 years would be the 100% that comes to the city. The city would then, per the interlocal agreement, take 70% of that amount and contribute that to the CDRA until we exhausted that 70% or they reached the cap. Again, whatever we determined to do. So again, that's just sales tax. There would also be property tax, close to about $3 million, I believe, over that period of time as well, generated from the area. So I think that number brings us in a little bit closer, right? We're looking at about 20, and this, again, low, $24.5 million of sales tax coming to the city. 70% of that would be given to the CDRA, which is about 17.2 million.
Yep.
The city does have some obligations. I'll point this out just so we know, again, what our ballpark numbers are. The city has an obligation, it's a statutory obligation to pay 10% of that TIF for housing. So 10% of that per statute has to be taken off the top for housing. That will leave you with just under 17 million. And then we do have an obligation to garden plots. The condemnation of those properties, there was a settlement agreement for that. We have to pay $200,000. So it's not a huge sum, but that is one of the obligations that comes out of that fund. So the remaining balance would be just under 16 million, I believe, if I'm doing my lawyer math correctly, on what Zions Bank's projections would be over that 15-year period.
So that, to me, sounds like a nice around 15 million.
So that, and again, that gets us in the ballpark, I think, right? Whether that's the amount that we think is necessary in order to really stimulate development in the area is part of the discussion we can have now, or when we can have later with the developer, if that's additional input that we might need. So, and one more example I wanted to provide, and this is a real life example, was the Draper Auto Mall. So Draper has a Carmelone Toyota dealership and a Ford dealership just off of the freeway on 114 South. They entered into an agreement with one dealership for a $3.1 million incentive over 10 years. So it comes out to about $310,000 a year, but they did not have an annual cap, and they are set to pay that off about 4 years early. So they're set to pay that off, I believe, this year, and we'll have paid that $3.1 million out over about a 6-year period.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was for one dealership, right? Our auto mall is projecting 5 to 8 service centers and dealerships, but maybe it's just one that comes, a giant one, like Sherry mentioned.
Hey, I'd take it in a heartbeat.
So those are some numbers, right? Those are some real life numbers. That works for them. They were in a different area of the state, right off of I-15. We might expect to get those types of sales in the future. I don't know that we would right away. I'm not an expert. GSBS's study doesn't really give any insight on that. But again, it comes down to what the board thinks would be an appropriate amount in order to stimulate that based upon some of these numbers that I've presented. And I don't have a slide for it. I've presented one for myself. I'd be happy to send that out to all of you just so you have this in the future, these numbers from these studies. But
So here's my thought on that, thinking through the numbers conservatively as we've gone through, and I want Alan to maybe weigh in on this. With that being said, with everything that's going on, I would be comfortable, like I said, with 15 million total for the project. That includes all dealers' incentives, that includes all public infrastructure improvements done by the developer, that includes the whole kit and caboodle. So for me, as I'm looking, based on those numbers, which I think are sound, And I don't think that there's anything I hear there that's seems out in the wind. And I think Alan would be screaming at us if he thought so. I would be comfortable with a cap of 15 million. And then everything that we said earlier, taking from that total of 15 million. I would not necessarily be comfortable going much more over that because I don't want to put us in a situation where, I mean, ultimately, we could put a $100 million cap on it and they'll never hit it and fine, like it's basically no cap. But I think 15 million puts a reasonable number and puts a reasonable expectation that we are committed to putting 70% of what we expect to come in during that time. And if it does better, great for us. And for me, it more, we'll pay you back faster. If it doesn't, you know, something of a little is better than all of nothing, kind of thing. So that's my thought. But obviously I'm one of five, but 15 million I think is it would be a good number. Any other thoughts on that? Or do you guys disagree with me?
No, I just like to see you put some stuff together, get some of the kind of the public infrastructure numbers together so we kind of have a better feel for, you know, this kind of portion would go to dealerships, this kind of portion would go to that type of thing, and so we have a better breakdown of the numbers and go from there.
Yeah, I intended to wait just to make sure that was the direction
sure.
the board wanted me to go, because I think that language we can definitely craft and then work on the particular numbers at a future date, so.
Yeah, I like it. I'll be glad to make a motion to adjourn if we're to that point.
Do we have any other discussion on this item?
Just want to make sure Chase feels like he has the direction he needs to keep moving.
Yep.
I appreciate it. I think that was a very good discussion. And appreciate all the work you put into it, Chase, as far as the, some real life examples and some of those things and how it may apply with the other data there. That really helped, I think, bring it into focus for me a lot better to feel a little more comfortable in the path that we're headed down. So I really do appreciate all the work in there.
Welcome.
All right, Sherry, I'll accept your motion.
Yes, motion to adjourn the Community Development and Renewal Agency of Harriman City.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we will begin in 15 minutes, or 12 minutes. Do we know where Wendy and Steve are?
Walk of shame, is that what you called it, Jim?
I got the nod from Jackie. I know. You good, Jonathan? All right. I would like to welcome all members of the audience, mostly staff, and the member of our community that joined us in person. And then I'd also like to welcome anybody who is joining us digitally to the Harriman City Council meeting for Wednesday, January 13th, 2021. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. Our Councilwoman Orrin has agreed to lead us in that.
Please arise and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Orrin. Grateful for that. We will move on to City Council comments and recognitions.
I have one. Actually, I just got this. It was in my council mail. I'll read it if that's okay. It's a letter from one of our residents. It says, "Hi, Sherry, and whomever it may concern. Donna and I wish to express our sincere gratitude for this wonderful city in which we live. It seems that everything the city does is first class. We love living here. The main reason for this thank you note is that 3 very congenial and well-dressed city employees came to our door and delivered a new Apple iPad and Apple Pencil. We had filled out the request form to receive a tablet so that we could communicate with our grandchildren during this pandemic. We are overwhelmed with this beautiful gift. It opens up a whole new way of communicating. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The amenities the city develops reach those of all ages. We love the senior get-togethers, meals, and programs at Thanksgiving time, this year accepted. The shopping coupons to Harriman business was a great way to help them survive this pandemic. Our friends in other close cities were amazed. The splash park, the skateboard park, the hiking, walking, biking, and horse trails, the many parks, the ice skating ribbon, the fish pond, etc. I could go on and on. We shop local as much as possible. We love the secondary water system privilege. Snow removal is timely and sufficient. We are pleased with the planning for the future growth. We realize the great effort required. We are pleased with our new city police. All in all, we love living here. We are treated with courtesy and respect by city employees every time we have a need to every time we have a need to communicate, please pass on our thanks to all involved. Sincerely, Russ and Donna Davy. What a great letter. What a great tribute to everybody who works hard here. It pretty much covered everyone, so thank you. I'll add my thanks too, and for the programs and just a lot of hard work and effort.
And especially to our staff for making those efforts
Yeah.
to include so many of our community, even in, this unique situation we find us in, to making sure they're reached out to and communicated with and still feel part of the community. Great, fantastic job. Thank you so much for reading that, Sherry.
Yeah, and thanks to the Davies for acknowledging. That was very kind to receive this.
I have one comment. Last week, our country witnessed something that hadn't happened in over 200 years. I don't know, I want to call them idiots, is probably the best word, but people breached the security of our Capitol building and did some damage, including some people lost their lives, some security guards that working there. I was talking to my children, and I was trying to explain to them that this is a day that you will be talking about to your children and grandchildren about, that you remember this day. As tragic as that event was, and as shocking as I think it was to all of us, to witness and see that actually happen, the rhetoric and fallout after that is what is really disturbing to me. The rancor, the vitriol, the just frank unkindness and accusatory nature of the communication I've been hearing and seeing in media, on the radio, social media, even in conversations among family members. It's terrible. I searched and looked, trying to find some wise quote from the past that would help make sense of this or give us some direction or help us find some way through this. And there's two quotes I found from former presidents on I guess opposite sides of the political spectrum that I just wanted to share these two quotes that I thought were helpful. This is from John F. Kennedy. He said, "Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings." I think that's a really wise thing, that the problems that exist in our society are things that we have the ability to fix and make better. And it's not helpless or hopeless to make change or to make the world a better place. We have that ability, and I would encourage all to do. Second quote is from President Ronald Reagan. And he said, "The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor." I think in large part, regardless of what you hear and see in published and spoken media, that this country still holds common values, that we are largely still, we didn't all come here on the same ships, but we're all in the same boat. I believe in the goodness of people and in the greatness of our country. And I think that if we could start looking at each other as 80% allies and not 20% traitors and enemies, I think we'd be doing a lot better. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
I've got just a quick one. Just going back to, I think, what fantastic staff we have. I had the opportunity with Councilman Shields as well this afternoon just to sit in as part of our audit committee, where we were able to meet with our auditor and receive the findings, and I know everyone will get a chance to see this later. But really what I just want to do is point out what tremendous staff we have. Alan is our finance director, all of those that work in the finance department, but that goes across to all departments and every employee here in the manner in which they take care of the city's budget. Obviously, we've come to expect a lot because we've already seen a lot out of our finance department and really the awards that they get for their budget year after year. But once again, obviously, we have a clean report that's been given back to the city. And again, I know we'll all get a chance to review that together at a later council meeting. But again, I just want to point out what a tremendous task that is, first and foremost, when you're talking about a city budget. Obviously, millions and millions of dollars, and the task of the services that have to be provided on a daily basis, and all of the ins and outs that go with running a city, and the professional and dedicated manner in which all of our staff do that. But obviously, when it comes down to the bookkeeping side of things, Alan and his staff, and what a great job they do. So just wanted to point that out and recognize them for their efforts.
Councilman Shields, I appreciate your comments. I'm going to take off my mask here to make sure that I'm understood clearly. The United States of America has for hundreds of years, focused on what is best about each and every one of us. And there's things that we hold very, very dear. One of those things that we hold extremely dear is the right to assemble. One of the things about that right, though, is that right requires that we assemble peacefully. I am a firm believer in the right of a community to come together and to assemble and to protest peacefully. I think that it is appropriate for our community to come together and protest peacefully. We are a country of law and order. We are a state of law and order. We are a community of law and order. And we expect and require that our residents follow through with what's demanded of them for them to exercise their rights. As we move forward in the next couple of weeks, I will personally defend any individual's right to gather and assemble in a peaceful manner and ensure their opportunity to assemble in a peaceful manner. However, crime and violence will not be tolerated. And so, as history looks at us 10, 100 years from now and looks at the actions that our community takes, they'll judge us based on the kindness that we show each other and the determination we follow through to make sure that we live up to the things that we've said we will live up to. I encourage all of our residents and all members of our communities to remember kindness as we focus on the potential disagreements we have tomorrow, next week, next year. That by being kind to one another, we will be able to come through and address the issues in places we may disagree and find ways to move our community forward. Thank you. Any other comments from the council members? Okay. If there are no further comments, we will move on to item 5 of our meeting, which is the public comment portion of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the city council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda and minutes, where they will receive a link to join the electronic meeting to submit a written comment. Your statement would then be read into the public record.
At this time, I'll open up the public comment portion of our meeting to anybody in the audience. Seeing none, I'll move to our recorder to see if we have any electronic. Appears we do, so I'll turn the time over to our recorder.
This comment is from Nancy Bean. The city of Harriman renamed our street at the suggestion of one family on the street. He wanted the street named after his grandfather. There are a total of 6 voting tax-paying families on 13360 South across from Violet Peak Road. We protested the name, but it was changed anyway to Mural B Circle. We were not able to have food delivered during a pandemic and had packages marked undeliverable. Again, the residents disputed the naming of the street as it is not representative of the surrounding neighborhood or easy to spell out. Obviously, the spelling was a problem because after changing the street sign, we were told it was misspelled by your administration and will be renamed to Mural B. We dispute this name too, but are now told it has to be a unanimous decision. Our once peaceful neighborhood is wrought with anger and protests. Not 1 but 2 names were ramrodded on us. I've contacted engineering, our council member Clint Smith, and the mayor. When will we receive some attention to this matter? How many times do you have to have your address changed, mailing label, stationery, and contacts to every place you do business with updated? What is the cost to do that? Multiply that cost and time and consider what has been done by city residents who don't like the name to begin with. We sound like a... That sounds bad. Thank you.
Is that the only item?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments or questions or concerns regarding those items?
I never knew anything about it,
Okay.
but hopefully that's being followed up with.
I would ask that staff in a future work meeting, please provide us with some additional information. I know that these situations can be sensitive on both sides, and so I'd just like to get some more information about what specifically has been going on and what contact the city has actually received in this item. I also would like information on what our process is for renaming streets, because I'm not aware that we had named a street after anyone and that had not gone through this body. And so I think that that's a substantial thing to do. I'm looking to staff to make sure that you just be in front of me. That's what you get.
Blake says he has a comment.
I can do a quick response really quick.
Sure, we can do a quick response.
Thanks, Mayor. We can bring this back to a work meeting for sure and talk about it. The reason the street name was changed is it was a number, and there was a subdivision going in on the end of the street that added 2 lots, and the county won't let us keep the streets as a number. So the developer brought in the name, and we didn't see any issue because the county makes us rename streets pretty often. So they renamed it to this name, Mural B Circle, and it was spelled wrong with the application for it, so the sign came in incorrect the first time, and it got put up, and we've taken it down. But we've went to the residents and asked them to come up with a different name if they would like, and I just don't know if they're coming together. So we'll get some background information done on that. We'll reach out to them, come back and present to you where we're at, and see if we can get something moved along to get some happiness in that circle.
Okay.
So Blake, wasn't the city was forced to change the name because of a county requirement. Is that what I understood?
They don't allow number coordinates unless it's a major street, like 134th, 126. This was just a minor street, so they make us use names.
Okay. And so the name that was proposed obviously came via the developer, but at the time that was settled upon, it wasn't really known that there was issue with all of the surrounding neighbors.
Yeah, there's existing residents on that street, and this was a new subdivision that chose the name of the street. So that's an area where we could definitely improve on being a little more sensitive to what the name changed.
So
Because we didn't contact the residents prior to changing it.
There was a letter sent out, and it goes out and says, hey, we're changing your address, and here's what it's going to be, and you've got some time to respond. And they did come in that time, and we were working on it, but
So I think that's where I'm looking for some more information regarding, particularly in the fact that
I would say most people would look at having a street named after someone as a substantial honor. And I think there's a reason to avoid just allowing anybody to have any street named after them. And that when we start getting into that realm, that may be something that this body should be participating in.
We didn't know.
And
They just submit the name.
And I'm aware of that, but if we can get some, just so that we can clarify if there's a process to that, what our process is, and maybe this council may decide that they want to set some guidelines on naming them after an individual, alive or deceased.
It is annoying because my address was changed because of the development around me, and you got to change it with your bank, you got to change it with every
Oh, yeah,
entity possible.
it's a nightmare.
I mean,
Just trying to get someone to change their email address.
no, so I foresee in the future more objects and less first names in the future. That's what I foresee.
Yeah, we try to not get in the business of naming streets. That's the one thing we always tell developers, you name your own streets, we're not going to help
Hey,
you
that's
out
why I
with
said objects, not names.
that. They come in with any of our staff name, we usually say, change that to someone else's.
So,
Something else.
so
So, okay, we'll get back with you on
Chase
that.
Andresi Road.
I'm for it. Let's do it.
Okay, all right. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we will get more information in the future. All right, we'll move on to item 6. Actually, with that, we will close the public comment portion of our meeting, as we have received all of that, and I will move on to item 6, City Council Board and Committee reports.
I can go. I was late coming to work meeting because I was in the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District meeting. And I will just continue to beat my steady drum about how dry it is. Salt Lake City annual temperature and precipitation for last year, our average temperature was just about 56, just a little bit below 56, which is very high. I wish I could just show you this and you could just say, see, this is really high. But probably more concerning was our precipitation in inches. Third driest year since I don't even know. I can see 1800s on this list, so for a long time. 1966, 1979 were both just tiny bit drier than this year. So extremely dry, warm. Our July through December temperature and precipitation, it was the driest July through December on record. So we are in a drought, a severe drought. The state of Utah in general, there's probably maybe 3/4 of the state that's an exceptional drought year. It's a D4, which is extremely high. So real problem with the drought. Our snowpack, when they first did our packet last week, our snowpack for the Provo Jordan rivers was at 64%, but as of today, it's down to 57%. So we need moisture really, really bad. And in addition to that, the problem is the soil saturations. So driest soil saturations on their records. Now, the soil saturation records aren't kept as long, so it doesn't go back as far, but we're at 24% soil saturation. So that means that when the snowpack, this 57% snowpack melts, most of it's going to go into the soil. So it's not going to fill our reservoirs and things like that. So I don't know what you all do for asking for help. I don't know if you pray or you do rain dances or whatever we do. I would invoke you to ask for snow because we need it desperately. That being said,
Sherry, I was just going to suggest that as the mayor has made provisions for people to peacefully gather, we could ask them to then in turn do precipitation dances.
Whatever we need to do, because we really need some precipitation. The one thing that we can do, and we don't think about it a lot in the winter because we're not watering our lawns and things like that, and it's really hard when it's really cold and you want to take a really, really long hot shower because it's just the way to get warm. but turn off your tap a little bit earlier. Make sure when you're brushing your teeth, you're not running your water. All the little simple water conservation things that we can do now will really help have an impact on us as we go through the next year. Now, Jordan Valley has done an excellent job of planning for the future. We're okay. We're going to make it through this next water year. I'm not trying to suggest you should be wasteful, but we have a lot of new growth and construction in our city. So when you guys are starting to plan those backyards, take a class. Jordan Valley offers classes on how to waterwise your yard. Take a class. You can sign up for that right now and take it during the winter so that when spring comes and it's time to start landscaping, you can do it waterwise. Just do everything we can, and if each of us will take the initiative and do everything we can to promote conservation in our own homes and in our own yards, it'll go a long ways to softening the blow from these droughts. Anyway, that was my rant. Once again, please pray or whatever y'all do to ask for help, get it some precipitation.
Well, Sherry, I have a different take on the drought. Less water means less mosquitoes. Yeah, it was really great. It was one of the overall, fewest mosquitoes around year. It was really good. We did see a continued decrease in West Nile virus activity in 2020. There were 0 human cases reported in the state, and only 5 pools actually tested positive at all for West Nile virus. So that's really good news from the lack of standing water, although it's bad news. Just a couple of things from the Mosquito Abatement Board. They have been putting new information into the GIS database. That's including the mosquito crews that they have that go out. So they've been able to increase their productivity, streamline the real-time reporting. They know what's going on much better. It makes them more effective, more efficient, saves money, and kills more mosquitoes. So all in all, it's a big win. I'm really excited to report that that mosquito board those guys know what they're doing, man. They're doing a great job. It's really cool to see them doing that. Then in nothing to do with the drought, Associated Municipal Councils met, and we had a couple of kind of legislative reports, I guess you would say. We had Cam from the league give a presentation and talk to us a little bit. And it was interesting to me to hear how many bills our state legislators are advancing or proposing that have to do with taking away local control, taking away our zoning rights, forcing property types, forcing accessory dwelling units, dictating density and property types in communities, limiting impact or building permit fees, inspection fees. I mean, all of these things designed with the idea of that they will lower costs associated with homes and therefore make homes more affordable. Now, I'm going to tell a story. I said this to all the members of the other communities that were on the call, as well as to the league. And I want to say this first of all. I think that all of our businesses in our community should be able to be profitable, make money. I don't believe in government setting price controls. I'm not interested in that. But that being said, a story was related to me by a builder in our community who released 4 units in a development that they're doing. And those 4 units received upwards of 39 offers for those 4 units in one weekend. And I said, well, what are you going to do about that? And they said, well, obviously, we just have the homes priced too low. They're setting prices based on market forces, not based on the actual cost to build the damn house. So when we talk about limiting building permit fees, limiting impact fees, design elements making it cheaper or more affordable to build, zoning issues obstructing their ability to build homes, it's bull pucky.
Nice save.
Horse excrement. It is an attempt by those who are in our legislature who either are builders or affiliated with builders to make it more profitable for builders. We need to take a stand against this. We need to aggressively and repeatedly make this statement that our city knows what's best for our city. And we have to retain the right to make those decisions, regardless of whether or not that's inconvenient to a developer. Thank you.
We've applauded.
Sorry. Amen.
It's not good. It's awesome.
Okay, I've got a couple quick updates from the sewer board.
I wanted to applaud.
Oh, man, I'm pissed.
From the sewer board, we've mentioned several times the thermal drying project that has been in the works for several years now, and the fact that COVID had a significant impact on the plans and the timing of that. But got an update just this week from Craig White down at the sewer district that they've started up all of the boiler systems. The boiler inspection was completed. The biosolid sludge holding tanks were pumped into for the first time. All of these systems are coming online, which all lead up to, obviously, the startup of the thermal drying project. The dryer was brought up to full temperature. All of the inspections are done down there from Riverton's building department as far as the new construction goes, and training has commenced for all of the personnel down there that will be running that. Again, the goal of this project and what it is designed to do is to take all of the water, which is 80% of the waste that's hauled off site from the sewer treatment plant, and it will take that water out of it, thus obviously significantly decreasing the amount of waste hauled out, and actually turns it into a more usable product. So this is a huge step for the sewer district, something that, again, has been in process for many years. It will actually take them a couple of weeks to get the whole dryer system to calibrate the way that it needs to, and actually be able to start seeing any major production out of it. But again, their dates of final completion date is set at February 12th right now, and that is a major milestone with some significant delays brought on by COVID, and something that will significantly help in terms of the sewer district's production of waste and how they handle that moving forward. I'm excited actually to see it in process, and I'm working with and hopeful that at some point we can get the whole council down there to do a quick tour. The facility is honestly quite fascinating, and it is obviously one of the state-of-the-art facilities really anywhere in the West. And I think it would be just a good educational opportunity for everybody to go down and see that, and now be able to see the components of the thermal drying project that is coming online and how that changes the dynamics of the production down there. But it's a big step for the sewer district, and again, talk about another phenomenal staff. Moving on to the league, obviously, Councilman Shields has touched a little bit on just as far as what the league is focused on, and that, of course, is the legislative session, which begins next week. So it's all things legislative at this point, with bill tracking and obviously following bills and getting input from the communities that they represent on positions on those bills and how we move. Tammy, I know, sent out a PowerPoint today to the group from the last LPC, and that's obviously now will be on a weekly basis moving forward through the legislative session from the league. This is obviously the very busy time of year for the league. And then lastly, I'll just report that Conference of Mayors, the last meeting we had was in December, so this month is COG. So Conference of Mayors won't meet again until February. But again, we talked in that group about we were still dealing with some of the tail ends of the CARES Act spending. And then there was some discussion on homeless accommodations, again, as we really get into the thick of the winter months. And I think there was a story around that there's been an alternate site that was opened up in Salt Lake City, a hotel, that was basically put under contract to help deal with that overflow situation, and it's a significant item this time of year. But then lastly, like everyone does at this time of year, COM went through their nominations and identification of officers for the next year, and I was put in as the vice chair of COM for the next year. So a great organization, obviously. They're a good opportunity to continue to work with those from around the county and come together on some of the same issues that we see from in each jurisdiction. So that's my report for my committees.
I should mention, I was nominated and voted on to be vice chair of Association of Municipal Councils as well, so.
Mayor, may we get some direction, some staff direction for boards and committees and the mayor pro tem? Jackie sent out a list of what your current assignments are. We need to have some discussion in future meetings about assignments and those types of things. So can I get some direction from you all on how to move forward with those?
I just would defer to discussing. I appreciate that we got all the information as far as who's on what council and stuff, but I did not have enough time to disseminate to just this. I feel like there may be some need for some balance in it, but I'd like to have a good work meeting discussion to hammer it out.
So a work meeting on the 27th?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be my preference.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Clint called me earlier today. We had a conversation about it. I was trying to express to him, and I'll just share it for the rest of the council here, and I have a few minutes. These council assignments are crazy. There's a lot of time. I had no idea. Everybody warned me, but I really was quite ignorant of the amount of time and commitment it takes for some of these, and some of them are even far and above anything that I'm participating in and representing us in right now. So I want to take the time to make sure that I thank all of my fellow council members for their time and commitments with those responsibilities. They are not easy or convenient to take time out of your day to go to all these different kinds of meetings. So thank you for doing that. That being said, I take these assignments seriously and recognize that there are multiple factors that we should be considering as to who serves in what role, and I don't know that I would say that one of those factors is any more important than any other factors. But if I'm going to come to this body and make a suggestion or recommend a change in assignment or a different assignment or something like that, I want to make sure I've had time to kind of think about that and make a reasonable presentation to my fellow council members, instead of doing something kind of on the fly and then taking a vote on it the next week. And if I came back in 2 weeks and had a different opinion, that would undermine what we had done before. So I want to make sure I have a chance to think about it before we enter in that discussion. And so I was proposing that we just delay it until the 27th to have a little more robust, prepared conversation about it. So that was my only reason for it.
Any other comments? So we'll plan on work meeting on the 27th.
Well, I'll just make a couple of quick comments. As Steve mentioned, yes, I did give him a call today. I'm actually trying to reach out to Steve, Jared, and Sherry. Sherry and I were able to text back and forth a couple of times, but weren't able to connect just because of schedules. Same with Councilman Henderson, but I did try to reach out to all of them because, and the reason that I did that was because as we had some email dialogue back and forth last night about this topic, the last email that I sent to the group was I had proposed that we at least start that initial discussion as part of our work meeting tonight. But then there was no more comments after that. And to be fair, Wendy had asked for some clarification on that process prior to me sending the email, and there was no clarification on either. And so that's why I reached out to the other members of the council today, is to try and understand their points or hesitancy, whatever it was, in terms of hoping to still be able to at least have that initial discussion tonight, because I think that we are all very well versed on the committees, their responsibilities, and those types of things. And because of timing with some of our committees, I think it's important that we settle that sooner than later, because if there are going to be changes, those need to be able to be communicated and recognized, I think, in as timely a fashion to any of these bodies that we serve on, because there is an aspect of continuity that I think is very important that goes along with that. Again, I'll go back to COM. I think it's fair to say, or at least I hope it's fair to say, that after working on that committee for the last couple of years, I think it was because of the trust and the relationships that have been built there that, call it somebody didn't want to take the responsibility and threw somebody else under the bus or not, but at least as a group, because I think that sometimes that is certainly the case. Right. But certainly, I think that, again, those relationships were important, and that body at least having the confidence and to ask me to serve in the vice chair role. So I think that there's, and what I expressed to Steve today, and I'll express right now, is that I'm not opposed to having that discussion in the least. But I think that there should be a definite deference given to those that are currently serving in certain boards and capacities for the investment that they have there, and if there is a desire and a willingness for those members to continue to serve in that, I think that we shouldn't just make a change there for sake of making a change if we have members, again, that are invested in a certain aspect or process of it, because there is a lot to be said about continuity of these groups, the relationships that are built, the trust that are built, and how honestly there's a lot of tenure that bleeds into the other assignments that come from COM, from COG, from Wasatch Front, WFRC. So again, that's really what I wanted to discuss, because I felt like there was some hesitancy, obviously, last night to have the initial conversation. I felt like the work meeting was the appropriate place to initiate that conversation tonight. And obviously, we didn't do that. I didn't have a chance to get on everybody's radar before that. But I did want to have an opportunity to share, since we brought up this topic now, just some of my thoughts and feelings, having had some of the conversations I did today.
I guess when I said I didn't have a chance to, my other concern was it wasn't noticed that way. We didn't notice it to discuss it. I feel like if we're going to have a discussion about something, it should be noticed. Because if it's noticed, I prepare for it because it's in my packet, it's in my agenda, and I'm ready to speak about it. And it was not noticed that way, so I think it would be inappropriate to have that discussion here unless it's properly noticed prior
Sherry,
to that.
I certainly respect that. Steve and I talked about that exact item today. And that's why again, my ask in the email last night was for the work meeting. I think that the work meeting is absolutely the appropriate place for us to bring up really any item that the council sees is pertinent and relevant to have a discussion of, because there's going to be no final decisions made in a work meeting setting. There never can be. And I don't want to, this is exactly what I told Steve today, I don't want this body to become so hamstrung by we're not going to discuss something unless it's noticed, because things change continually. Issues come up, and there is, and my understanding and my belief, I guess our attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the work meeting is the appropriate place to have discussions on things that may not have been slated for a necessary discussion because it's something that has come up. Again, it's only for discussion. There's no decisions that can be made until we properly notice them on the regular city council agenda to take formal action. And again, that was my ask in the email last night.
So I guess I'm confused, but I learn something new every day. So we can just discuss whatever we want to in the work meeting without noticing it?
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is I think that with complete understanding and even agreement and respect for what Clint said about, there are times where something comes off, we go off on a tangent, and we're having a conversation about something wasn't necessarily noticed, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We kind of go with the flow and have the conversation we have. But I think part of the reason we have agendas and the notices and post them and let the public know is not only is our decision-making subject to their scrutiny, but our deliberations on those things is also subject to their scrutiny and observation. And so I think if there's a specific topic we're going to talk about, we should put it on the agenda and let people know that that's what we're going to be talking about. That doesn't necessarily mean that it will be all-encompassing of every topic and things that we may or may not tangentially discuss. But I think if we're going to have a discussion about assignments, that we should notice it and let people know. But again, I would look to recording legal counsel to give us some clarification on that, so.
You all bring up a lot of good points about the purposes of a work meeting, notifying those things. My practice has always been that there's a little more breadth within discussion on a work meeting than there is on a regular city council meeting, because during the city council meeting, you're generally there for action, right? I prefer to have things noticed on a work meeting agenda. Again, however, you could be pretty broad on what it is that you're noticing up on that agenda. One other point that came to my mind while we were discussing this topic that I'll just mention so I can get it off my mind is some of these boards, and I don't know which ones, require not only an appointment but a confirmation either by resolution or a vote. And so if that is the case for some of these boards, it wouldn't be sufficient just to have a discussion during the work meeting, right? That may be the precursor to the actual appointment or vote. And in some cases, I don't know that they go this extreme, but the passing of a resolution, right, appointing someone to that board. So that being the case, there may be value in having a discussion during the work meeting and then during the same meeting having the item on for action.
I'm okay with that.
In the same
too.
meeting. Because technically, the council's rules and procedures require that to have happened during the first meeting in January. We're a week late, which, I mean, shame on us, but we're not going to crumble because we're a week late. So given that, though, that would be my recommendation, is that we maybe have that discussion as soon as possible with the vote as soon as possible thereafter.
And I think that in the future, I think probably the appropriate way for us to have the discussion, and then, as we've done with so many other topics, and Clint made this point to me today, is that we generally will discuss it and then wait a couple weeks before we make something official. We want to give the public, I raised the issue that last year when we were doing committee assignments, I got feedback from a few members of the public about, well, we didn't know that was happening. We wanted some input on, they cared about who was serving where. And I was like, okay, I'm like, look, I just took everything that Nicole had and whatever else came up that nobody else wanted to do. So that's what happens when you draw the short stick. So no offense, I enjoy the council committees I'm on, but if we're going to have the discussion and the action on the same night, that really is a little bit of an exception to our practice. It might need to be done in the instance, in the interest of timeliness, and as Clint pointed out, trying to get those decisions made early so that any adjustments would be accommodated into the boards that are going to be making their changes and stuff too, so.
So I go back to the point that it is specifically in our policy that we do this in the first meeting in January, specifically because of that timeliness, which is why I thought we were going to do it today. I understand that that there might be some members of the public might have a desire to add input, but these assignments are assignments where an individual is representing this board as a whole. So they should not be representing their feelings differently than what this council and body have decided, which has been made abundantly clear multiple times by this body in multiple situations, that they're representing this body and should represent the views of the body as a whole. So I don't see an issue necessarily in this specific circumstance with making the decision and getting it done so that we can let those bodies know and have that continuity and get going. And unfortunately, it does kind of have to wait until the first of the year, because every other year we have new members of this body. And so we can't make those discussions until that body is all in place. So
this would be one of those few things where I think we're already behind per our policy, and we need to, I think, I would ask that staff put this on for both discussion during the work meeting and action during the general meeting, so that we can take action and can get moving on this in our next meeting, please.
I mean, I just went back and checked, just to be fair, we got notice about this in the list of board assignments at 5:48 last night, so. I'm not blaming anybody, things happen, it's not the end of the world, but to get something at 5:48 and then be prepared to have a discussion about those assignments the next day, I had an incredibly busy day, very full plate. I know other members of the council had really busy days too. I just want to make sure I'm giving it fair consideration. I guess that's all I'm saying is with absolute respect and almost agreement with everything you guys have said, all the other members of the council. I was just advocating for a little extra time to make sure that I was giving it my full consideration instead of a rushed decision at the last minute. So,
Yeah.
Do you have the direction you need next meeting? Please have it on for both the discussion and action.
I was just
item.
going to say, I'll support, the mayor's recommendation for work and agenda for the next time, because secondarily to that is obviously the mayor pro tem discussion, and if I remember correctly, the mayor pro tem term actually
expires
on the 31st each year.
So we don't.
And
currently
again,
have
we're
a mayor pro tem.
required by our own bylaws to redo that at the first meeting. Is that correct?
Our rules state, yeah, they do require us to appoint the mayor pro tem at the first meeting held in January, but it does not expire until the actual election takes place. It says it goes for one, so I'll read the actual language. Term. The mayor pro tem shall serve for 1 year or until the next meeting where a new mayor pro tem is elected.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate
So,
that.
to me, I would interpret that as 1 year or sooner.
That's
if
one way to
elected.
interpret it. Yeah.
So the way I would interpret it is, once we've hit 1 year, that term has expired. And how did we write that in the resolution? Because that is by resolution, is it not?
It is, and I believe it says calendar year.
Calendar year.
So I'm not trying to belay the point. It's more of the importance of needing to act. On that note, it would be my recommendation to this body that for the next year that we appoint Councilman Smith as the next mayor pro tem. One of the things we've tried to do is to give all members of this body an opportunity to fill that seat as they go through their term. This will be the 4th year for for Councilman Smith. It will be his last opportunity before having to rerun for office. And so it'd be my recommendation that we give him that opportunity, as we discussed a year ago when we had that discussion a year ago in regards to Councilman Henderson filling last year, and then what we were going to do for this year. So that would be my recommendation. We're not going to necessarily do that right now, but that's where I would like, and that's not a decision I've come to shortly or lightly. It's something that we've kind of done in years past. So that's my 2 cents on that item. And will we please have that on for discussion and action item, not necessarily for what I just said, but just discussion action item for next week as well.
Yes, we can do that. And then I'd also like to bring back the council-appointed boards and committees. We usually review and renew those at the beginning of every year, so we'll bring those back the same
Please.
evening.
Please.
And on those, if you could send that list out to us a little bit early so that we can review those.
Yeah, we need to get in contact with them and make sure they're still wanting to serve and make sure all of that's.
They watch us for too long and realize, uh-oh, they might end up in this seat. I'm looking at somebody in the back of the room. All right, so we will move on to item 7, reports, presentations, and appointments. 7.1, presentation of the 2021 Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling District Budget and Area Cleanup. Pam Roberts. I'm assuming we have someone on the line. Hey, Pam, how are you?
Hi, Pam.
Welcome back.
Wait, Pam, before you move on through that, just so everyone's clear, on the 10, one container for every 10 households, which is less than what it was before, but down below it shows one container to every 7 households. But that's because that's all that requested them. I just want to make sure that people are clear on that, correct? It's not because we didn't service that many, that's just the request that we had come in, probably because it was the same time as our area cleanup for our city, is kind of what we're assuming, correct? Thank you.
Basically illegal dumping that's happening. Obviously, there's clear abuse that occurs. As you can see, the containers over there to the left, and then all the debris. That really needs to be about 3 containers, not just one. So our staff have to basically load that onto a rear loader and clear that out. As you can imagine, it's very labor intensive. It's also a big risk for our staff. Versus the container over here to the right that was parked in a resident's driveway. One driver tarps it and hauls it off. Very efficient and much safer. We don't get the many landfills. There's not illegal dumping. And then also that scavenging, the people that drive through the neighborhoods and pull items out of the containers to either resell or take them, which creates a mess as well. We didn't have that issue at all, which was really nice. And a lot less complaints. We usually get a number of complaints calling in about those scavengers. This is a cost analysis, and this is where I talked about the staffing. So the 2020 Modified Area Cleanup Program, it gives you a date range, May 11th to October 9th. It was a 22-week. Normally the program runs 23 weeks, and we should be able to do that this year with, getting kind of the regular time frame of starting that program, which will be in April. And you'll see the staffing. We started out with 16 drivers, and that was another reason I really asked the board to allow us to change. We averaged 12 drivers a day, and understand part of that is folks were not well. Part of that is they needed a day off or what have you. We ended the season with 10 drivers. And again, we need 21 drivers for the traditional program. In 2019, this kind of shows you some of the staffing issues on a quote unquote normal time frame. We started with 18 drivers, we averaged 11. And understand that means we have to pull our full-time staff off of the residential routes, which drives up overtime, drives up a lot of morale issues, to be honest. People get tired and they can't take time off. And on the area cleanup program, there were very few times we had to pull full-time staff over, which was really a blessing. This gives you the cost analysis with labor, all of the operational costs that go into that. And the savings was right around $350,000. This was projected. We now have actuals that we'll go over with the board and with Vice Chair Orrin tomorrow as well for the pre-board meeting. So you'll see those actuals. And again, in 2019, this shows the labor cost shift of $100,000 on top of that 518 that you see up there in the 12/31/19 category. So it's over $600,000 of labor costs then. Getting into we did a satisfaction survey results. Survey, I should say, to try to find out from residents how they felt about the program that we rolled out. So the responses to this, there were just over 2,700 responses. Please keep in mind the majority of the responses were those that utilized the program in some way. And so you'll see a pretty good satisfaction rating from the Harriman City folks. There were 334 residents that responded at 92% satisfaction, which we were thankful to see. District-wide, it was 83% satisfaction. And so you'll know overall satisfaction in 2019 was just over 81%. So that's a big improvement. And you can see some of the categories that residents ranked us. And then that we had some comments that came back. I'm going to scroll to this page. It gives you a satisfaction rating per community. And some, of course, were higher than others, and that's to be expected. With the Southeast, some of their ratings that were below that 81%, the majority of their issues were the scheduling and trying to make sure they got the containers that they felt they needed. So we hope to improve that this year. The comments that were left, again, center around the scheduling. Many residents want to see that service more often. There were some complaints about the driveways. Luckily, the reports of any damage were minor scrapes or scratches, which eventually will go away. So we're happy about that. There were some reports of debris being left, so we're going to make sure we try to address those this year. Again, the reservation process, just so you know, we are working hard with our new website development team. We hired a new vendor to help us beef up our website, make it more user-friendly, and then also a big focus on that reservation system and calendar for our residents. One of the big issues that residents complained about was not getting enough notice. So we'll mail out those postcards much earlier than normal. You're looking at a minimum of a 6-week notice, hoping to get more like an 8-week notice out to residents so that they have plenty of time to reserve. That's the long and short of it. I'm open to questions or comments or concerns.
No, I would just make a comment, Pam, just because I have the opportunity to serve on this board with Pam. And I think that if you think about rolling out a new program during some difficult times of uncertainty, to have a over 90% approval rating of that program is pretty significant. I think it just indicates people doing a good job, thinking hard about what needs to be done, not only rolling out a new program, but having to come up with a reservation system and things like that on the fly to make sure that we continue to offer the service. Like Pam said, the first thing was, well, we'll just cancel it for the year. And to be able to say, no, we're not going to cancel it. We're going to be innovative and come up with something different and still provide that service to our residents, I think is a big deal. And so I just really wanted to publicly thank you, Pam. I would tell the public that Pam runs a tight ship. This district, this district is not top-heavy. I watch so many government agencies that are, well, I guess it's not technically a government agency, but it kind of is. I watch so many of these districts and things be very top-heavy, just pretty interesting on their margins on the top and things like that. And this is not. She runs a very efficient operation, and people do their jobs, and they do their jobs well, and they're very cognizant of the money that comes in is coming out of our residents' pockets, and they're very cognizant of that. So I just wanted to publicly thank you, Pam, for running a great organization and always being on top of things.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say, Pam, I met you the first time over in our old building.
maybe 5, 6 years ago. And you continue to provide excellent service, and we appreciate the efforts that the organization does for our community and making sure that we get our waste removed from our streets. So thank you very much.
You are welcome, and I really appreciate your compliments. I'll make sure I pass them on to the team. Well deserved for all of them.
All right. Thank you very much, Pam. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Pam.
it.
Thank you. You all have a good night. Be safe.
You
Thanks,
too.
you
Thank
too.
you. We're going to move on to item 7.2, presentation of the 2019-2020 Harriman City Audit. Alan.
I totally stole Alan's thunder a while ago. I'm sorry, Alan.
Actually, we would like to continue this item. Our auditor's father-in-law died a couple days ago, and he did grant time to give us a report today, but he's with his family tonight.
That is
Damn.
extremely appropriate, and I don't see any problem from this body. Is there any disagreement on that?
No, because then
No.
people will forget I stole Alan's thunder.
Okay,
Other than,
fantastic.
other than to pass along our condolences also.
That is absolutely the appropriate place for that individual to be at this time. With so, we will move over to item 8.1, public hearing to allow public input regarding the issuance and sale of not more than $28 million aggregate principal amount of water revenue and refunding bonds, Series 2021, the bonds, and B, any potential economic impact that the project described herein to be financed with the proceeds of the bonds issued under the act may have on the private sector and related matters. Alan Ray.
Okay, this is a resolution that we passed last meeting. The parameters resolution calls for not more than 28 million in bonds, no longer term than 21 years, and no more than 3% interest, net interest cost. This is for water projects, for new water projects, and enhancing existing water projects, plus it's also refinancing some of our bonds that are currently have higher interest rates that we can save substantially on and should result in significant premium costs when we issue the bonds.
Awesome, thank you very much. With that, please be aware that this is a public hearing. As such, I will open the public hearing to anyone that is currently in the audience. Seeing none, I will move to our recorder, see if we have any. I am getting a no from our recorder that we have no comments there. The question stands then for the council. Would we like to maintain this public hearing, or would we like to close this public hearing? And we can do that by motion.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing on item 8.1.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Since council, just to make sure I do this right, since Councilman Shields was not in when the motion was not seated when the motion was initially made, should I be getting a vote from him on this item?
If he feels comfortable voting, he can.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, awesome. And I'll vote yes, that motion passes, this public hearing is closed. Nothing against you, Steve, I just wanted to make sure we're doing our
Totally got it.
Procedures.
May I make a comment, Mayor?
Yes, absolutely.
I just would say, I was concerned, obviously, anytime we borrow this kind of money, it always just gives me a headache. But I also wanted to make sure when we were going through all that there was sort of somewhat of a public hearing, some sort of a public process where people could come in and speak. And so the only reason I seconded the motion to close the public hearing is because no one came. So I will just say that.
Any further discussion by this council?
If I might make one additional comment is, I voted for it because I think there's definitely a need for those. We've talked about some things. I also still feel strongly that we could have probably stretched ourselves to take care of some other needs right now with very favorable financing terms. So although I appreciate that we're doing some, I still believe we should have and could have done more, so.
Awesome, thank you. We will move on to item 9, which is our.
Steve, I just wanted to make sure, just based on your comment, your vote yes was only to close the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Your comment made me believe that you thought maybe you had voted on.
No, I voted yeah, but the reason why I'm in support of this.
Okay, thank you.
because of it.
So we will move on to item 9, which is the consent agenda.
Sorry, that was a misspeak.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That motion is approved. Item 10.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance amending Title 8, Chapter 5 of the Harriman City Code related to sewage disposal and for the purpose of updating city code to comply with new state and federal requirements. Chase Andresi.
So before the break, the city received a letter from the Sewer District's council regarding some updates to federal law that necessitated a change to all of the members' code, essentially, regarding sewer waste. The council for the Sewer District prepared all of that for us, told us what we needed to do in order to come into compliance with those new requirements. Sent all of that to us, did all the great legal work for us for free, which I appreciated. And they now asked us to present that and have it passed before the 17th of January. So contrary to the council's practice of having this come to a work meeting and then scheduling it for action at the following meeting, we're asking that the council consider it, discuss it, and take action on that tonight.
My first question is going to be, in your opinion, are there any substantial changes that would cause us need to have discussion with the public on this item?
No, and in fact, the only change really is a reference to what the city previously referred to as Appendix A of items that were prohibited from being discharged into the city's sewer system, and it now refers simply to the rules of the sewer district that still prohibit those same items. It just changed, and there are some additional items and some additional definitions in those items that are promulgated by the sewer district that our code adopts and simply references to. So the material elements of the code are still the same, just changes that reference of what is prohibited from Appendix A to the sewer district's rules.
So it kind of gives the sewer district the control over that piece of it rather than the city having the list of it.
I'm sorry, what was that, Sherry?
So does it kind of give more of the control to the sewer district over what gets flushed versus instead of telling the city to have control over what gets flushed?
The control, well, I would say yes and no. The controls are still the city's, right? But we need to comply with the district's requirements in order to maintain that relationship with them, right? Similar to the other water conservancy districts and things that we just passed the water efficiency standards. I would analogize these changes to what we did there, right?
Makes
There's
sense.
some standards coming from the district that we're a member of that they've asked us to implement and enforce within our city.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And Chase, I think we've had this a number of times, by changing the language to where we reference their code, is that way it makes it so if there isn't one of those minor changes in there, we don't have to make a change every time on our side.
Correct.
Yeah.
To match that same language, because it will just stay current with whatever they change on their side.
That's correct.
And would it be the recommendation of our representative from the sewer district that we approve this item?
Yeah, this is just making sure that the city has the most up-to-date and is in compliance with the standards that the sewer district is held to by the state.
Yeah, it is very bureaucratic and procedural in nature, but it is a requirement, like I said, from the sewer district to comply with those.
Just out of
new
curiosity,
regulations.
what happens if we don't approve it?
I don't want to find out.
Okay. Like I said, out of curiosity.
Yeah,
Could be subject to fines,
Okay.
potentially.
yeah.
All right, if there's any further discussion, I'm happy to hear it. Other than that, I'd be happy to accept a motion on this particular item.
I will make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-01, adopting an amendment to the Harriman City Code, Title 8, Chapter 5, regarding sewage disposal.
I second that motion.
A motion and a second. Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. On to the new number for the resolutions, new year. Fantastic. We will move on to item 10.2, discussion and consideration of a zoning map amendment requested by Joe Darger on behalf of Joe Darger and Travis Kelsch, who are the property owners, for 4.99 acres of property comprised of 3 parcels located at approximately 13504 to 13508 South 7530 west from A1 agricultural 1 acre minimum to A.25 agricultural 10,000 square foot minimum. Michael.
Good evening and thank you. This is our timeline for this project. As you know, this was a legislative matter that was forwarded to you from the Planning Commission with a positive recommendation of approval, voted 6-0. We briefed the City Council on December 9th during your work meeting. And tonight, you have the opportunity on your regular meeting to vote for either approval, modification of the proposal. You can table the request for further review or deny the application. This is our vicinity map showing the location of the property. As you can see, it's on the edge of the city, between the city and the county. This is the property itself. You can see that it is currently A1 and it is surrounded on 3 sides with A.25 zoning. This is the general plan map. It is agricultural, residential, low density, so the rezone request is consistent with the general plan map. This is an aerial showing the property, and as you know, that there are 3 homes on the property currently. The applicant also controls the 3 parcels to the north of this property, and this rezone request is being forwarded in anticipation of doing some further subdivision and development in this neighborhood of all the properties combined. This is a concept plan that has been submitted. This has not been through an engineering review. This has not been approved by the Planning Commission. This is just something that's been submitted by the applicant. Just taking a quick look at the raw numbers, all the properties combined using the 1.8 base density allocation that is allowed in the 8.25 zone, that would yield approximately 17 units. If there is as you know, in the 8.25 zone, there are a couple of density bonus provisions that an applicant may qualify for. Looking at this property, it looks like there may be an opportunity to have half-acre buffers on the west end of the project, which would allow for an additional 0.1. At 1.9 units per acre, it would yield 18 units, and that's basically what you're seeing laid out here. Obviously, they're trying to address or accommodate existing lots. I believe, Mayor, you mentioned last time that this layout technically doesn't work because we obviously have some lots, lot 12 and 14, that don't have frontage. There's been some discussion about whether or not changes in a flag lot ordinance might allow for a different or maybe a better layout of this concept, but all of that will have to be worked out subsequent to any action that the City Council takes. As I mentioned or stated that the Planning Commission had recommended approval, we also discussed during the work meeting last time that it's been the city's preference, we've done this very consistently, that we have required as a zoning condition a minimum lot area of 1/2 acre adjacent to High Country Estates in Salt Lake County. That was not part of the Planning Commission's recommendation in their motion. I believe it was perhaps just an oversight. It wasn't part of the original request, but that is something that the City Council could amend as part of your motion tonight. In fact, we brought that up during the discussion, and the draft ordinance that is in your packet has that as a zoning condition already in the draft ordinance. But again, that is subject to your decision tonight.
Yeah, does the applicant have any issues with adding that? Have we talked to the applicant?
I have shared the staff report with the applicant and did not hear any concerns in response.
So we don't necessarily know that they're comfortable with it, they just haven't objected to it.
Haven't responded.
I just want to make sure
I did
we
have a conversation with him, and he didn't show any objection to it. It's what's been standard along the whole fence line.
Cool. Okay, great. I mean, my only concern on this is besides the half-acre lots, which I think is great, because with the half-acre lots, I think they justify the 18 total lots. The only issue that I have is lot 12 and 14. Those are my biggest concerns. But as far as, I don't think that's necessarily relevant to this decision, which is the zoning decision. When I look at
general plan, I'm very pro, if what the general plan says it's appropriate, it meets with everything that's around it. I don't see any reason why we should not approve this particular zoning change. So as it stands on just the zoning portion of it, I would be in favor of approving this with the half-acre zoning condition. With the half-acre adjacent to High Country Estates zoning condition. Any thoughts?
No,
Butcher?
no, you're gonna, not honey.
I was just gonna say, I'm, as it comes to the zoning, I think it's consistent, obviously, with the general plan and the other properties in the area as far as the zoning goes. So the zoning I don't have an issue with, but as mentioned, and has been the previous practice in this area, I would support approving it with the zoning condition for the half-acre buffers against the high country in there as well.
So do you want a motion?
If you don't have any further comment, I'd be happy to accept the motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-02, authorizing a zoning map amendment for 5 acres of property located at 13504-13508 south, 7530 west from A1 agricultural to A.25 agricultural.
I will second